literally round the corner. We could have done this in person. Yes, because my son's off nursery, so there has to be something to do. But anyway, welcome. If you haven't joined us before on Pour and Sip, double welcome. We are a really welcoming whiskey community. So if you haven't joined us before on one of these live tastings, please get involved and please tell us your thoughts on the drams that we're tasting. Please ask questions to our really special guests that we've got tonight. And basically, please get involved. Please give us your tasting notes. There's no question that's too silly. Please just ask it. We really want to hear what you guys think of these whiskies. The order of proceedings tonight is we are going to start in Wales with Penderyn, which I have here somewhere. Then, so we were really traveling around the world tonight, and then we're heading over to South Africa with the 3 ships. Then we are finishing the interview section with Wormtub, and then I will be doing a really, really quick whistle-stop tour of the Old Pulteney and the Knockdo Distillery. So we've got 3 really special guests lined up for you tonight. We've got Andy from 3 Ships, we've got David from Penderyn, and we've got Dave from Atom. So welcome everybody. And I think we should probably just get cracking, because I'm not going to just continue talking to myself because no one wants to hear that. So please welcome David from Penderyn. Hello, David.
Hello. How's it going?
I am really well, thank you. How are you?
I can ask you how it's going. I can be, I can be the person who's with you tonight and
that's exactly it.
Co-hosting.
You're my co-host.
Yeah, it's a very nice forest that you have there behind you. It's fantastic. Yeah, I had to make do with a dragon.
It's very Welsh. I have to say, it looks quite realistic from where I'm sitting.
Well, it's very realistic. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm only 3.5 miles away from David, so
nice.
We could have a drama.
You could have done it in person. Wow.
Yes, we could have done it in person. Finally, a Pour and Sip in person. Guy CP, evening all. Great start to a long weekend. Yes, please let us know where you guys are headed for the Easter holidays, and if you're taking any bottles of whiskey with you. I forgot to take a bottle of whiskey with me here tonight to Centre Park, and the only thing they had in the supermarket was the Jura Journey. So that is nice. What I bought. But anyway, let's begin. So David, talk to us a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into the whiskey industry and how you found yourself in your current role.
Oh, myself.
Yes.
I've actually been working in the whiskey industry like pretty much my entire career, because I just started at Penderyn as a tour guide, pretty much straight out of university. And I'm sure, as many people in the industry say, I just got very, very lucky. I got really into whiskey at university, as I'm sure some people do, but in different ways. I kind of got interested in single malts and why they tasted different. I think it was just like 2 Scotch single malt whiskies I tasted. I had 1 bottle of like Talisker or something, and I had a bottle of Singleton as well. Those whiskies were so different, and it just sort of, I fell down this rabbit hole of, well, why do those whiskies taste different? And I want to find out where the distilleries are and what they're doing differently and the types of casks they're matured in. I generally am quite obsessive when I get into stuff. So I sort of fell down this rabbit hole of learning, and Penderyn was the local distillery to my university, and I went for a visit there. And Penderyn was probably one of those whiskies that whenever you get into something, you have these sort of epiphany moments that like completely change your perception about that particular thing. I think it doesn't really matter, what you're into. If you're really into your coffee or cars or whatever it is, you have these moments. And Penderyn was sort of one of those where I'd never had a whiskey that was so fruity and expressive and really vibrant like that. So that sort of opened my eyes to, a new style of whiskey. And I thought, well, this would be like the perfect thing if I could manage to get a job there. And just about managed to swing it. They let me in eventually as a tour guide, and I just worked in the shop and have sort of slowly worked my way through. I worked in the distillery for a few months and worked down at the warehouse as well, doing packaging, bottling, you name it. I've pretty much done that job with Penderyn. So I'm kind of at the point now where they've let me off the leash a little bit more, where I'm doing tastings, masterclasses, festivals all around the world. So absolutely love it. It's absolutely fantastic job. Not the kind of job you get told about in school, though. When you're in primary school, kids want to be, professional footballers or astronauts or something. You don't get told about whiskey ambassador.
I don't think anyone has ever said in primary school or even secondary school, what do you want to be when you grow up, little Johnny? A whiskey ambassador.
Whiskey ambassador. But perhaps they should. I don't know.
Let's keep spreading awareness of this job.
Definitely.
And,
definitely.
one day it will be
very, very fulfilling career.
Exactly.
So yeah, it's fantastic. I've really enjoyed every second of it. Yeah,
and more to come. So talk to us a little bit firstly before we get into Penderyn. Talk to us about Welsh whiskey in general, because obviously it's not a category that all our kind of subscribers have tried before. What makes Welsh whiskey special? Kind of what's the history there? Was Penderyn one of the first?
Yeah, pretty much the first in like over 100 years. There was a massive distillery built in North Wales in the late 1800s, with the cost of it being, by today's money, about £15 million. So absolutely huge investment. They only lasted about 13 years. I think it was never really seen as a... It never really sort of gained any kind of notoriety of being a good whiskey, and was seen as a bit of a gimmick. And yeah, so they had to close their doors very sadly. I think there's a few bottles still kicking around for huge quantities of money. And we've actually got one at the distillery still, more as like a museum piece. But yeah, so there really wasn't much of a history of distilling at all. We have one distillery over 100 years ago. But I think that was one of the great things about Penderyn. There was no expectation on us of how the whiskey should taste, what casks we should use, how it should be distilled, any of this kind of stuff. So we had a sort of blank slate to play with, not just for our whiskey, but for the style of Welsh whiskey, I think, in total as a category, as there are more distilleries sort of popping up in Wales now. So we started in the year 2000. And I think what makes our whiskey very different, and I think Welsh whiskey sort of generally a bit different, is the distillation normally is very different. So we have a completely different style of still called a Faraday still. And I always take this diagram with me everywhere I go. Hopefully you can see that. That's worked out quite well, actually. So that's called a Faraday still. It's almost a bit like a hybrid between a pot and a column still. You can see it's got columns to it, but it's not a continuous process. It's just a batch. It's 100% made of copper. And this was sort of invented back in the 90s and found in a warehouse in South Wales. And the guy who was selling it off had gone bankrupt. So it was this amazing opportunity of like, well, is this still being sold off? The people who wanted to start the distillery, they owned a building with the water underneath and were just putting two and two together. But it was also this amazing opportunity of, it's something completely different. It's never really been tried before. It's not a double distillation. It's not a triple distillation. It's just one time. But the spirit coming off the still is over 90%. So really, really high ABV, very pure, clean, light, sort of fruity spirit. So it's a different style of spirit as well. So we never really wanted to copy Scotch whiskey and bring it to Wales, or Irish whiskey and bring it to Wales. We really wanted to do something very, very different and give us that different style, that point of difference to a lot of other distilleries. And then we use a lot of weird casks as well. So the main one we're probably known for is Madeira finish. Which is like our classic whiskey. And then the one that we're tasting tonight, the Rich Oak, is another sort of, it's not a sort of strange cask to see anymore because it's STR, so shaved, toasted, recharred barrels, which is something that was introduced, I guess, by Dr. Jim Swan. So you see it with a lot of newer distilleries, especially distilleries that were involved with Jim during his lifetime. Very sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago. So
on that, we'll get onto the STR part and the dram in particular. How important was Jim
hugely
with basically the setup of Penderyn and how it's kind of progressed?
Yeah, well, I think when we first started, it was just a few friends really who got together, actually at a pub, of course, where all the good ideas come from. And they were sat at this pub when they were talking about setting up the distillery originally. And what they had was they just about had enough money, and they had a huge passion for whiskey, but they didn't know a lot about the technicalities of how to make whiskey and what to do, what barrels to use, and all of this. And I think that probably took them a few weeks or months to kind of figure out that they didn't really know what they were doing. So they were looking for a consultant, someone to come and show them. and they managed to find this guy, Dr. Jim Swan, as it happened. But at the time, he was virtually unknown in the whiskey industry, maybe among some sort of technical whiskey circles or master distillers and master blenders, but really in sort of wider whiskey world was unknown. And he had just set up his consultancy at that point. So he became very, very heavily involved with Penderyn at the very, very beginning, which was really the best thing that we could have done, and had a hand in everything from the distillation, fermentation, mashing, showing us all what to do in the distillery, and then of course the cask management as well, which he's become very famous for. And he was the one originally who decided that Madeira casks would work the best with the style of the spirit that we produce, that it would sort of accentuate the natural fruitiness of the spirit. So yeah, he's had a hand in everything that we do, and of course it was such a huge loss, I think, to us and the whole whiskey industry in general when he passed away a couple of years ago. So yeah, he's definitely left his mark, I think, on the whole industry. And so the STR casks are kind of part of that legacy, I think, that he's left. But yeah, it was such a privilege really to be involved with him during his lifetime. And actually, he was only ever the official master distiller for Penderyn and for Kavalan in Taiwan, of course, as well. So he'd been involved with lots and lots of other distilleries outside of that and consulted with. But I think that sort of speaks to how involved he was with Penderyn as well.
Yeah, that's awesome to see as well, and the kind of success that's continued after his legacy there. And it's just his legacy will continue throughout. But so talking of Penderyn, we've spoken a little bit about the production processes and the really interesting stills that you use. What is the house kind of style of Penderyn for someone who's not tried it before? What coming up, the new make as well? What is the house style?
I think the two words that I end up saying almost constantly when I'm talking about Penderyn are light and delicate. Light and delicate. I just say that over and over again because I think that very high new make spirit, the very high ABV, high alcoholic strength spirit that's coming off from the still, it really means that there's less of all those sort of flavor chemicals, less oils, coming through into the spirit. And you have some whiskies, of course, that are very, very heavy in style. I know Dave's got the worm tub whiskey coming up, which is very much sort of anti-style of Penderyn, almost, I would say. The sort of very heavy worm tub style spirits. Penderyn is like the opposite end of the spectrum to those. It's probably even lighter than sort of triple distilled whiskies, I would say, as well, because you've got these columns to the still. It's really purifying a lot of that alcohol, and you're not getting so many of those flavor chemicals coming through. So I think the whiskey is definitely really, really light, but it's not quite getting into neutral territory. And I think if you smell the new make spirit, especially when you've added some water to it, there's a very natural fruitiness that comes out. Which I really, really enjoy in Penderyn. I think it's so normally very, very fresh, vibrant, and often the whiskies are quite young as well. You'll see almost all of our whiskies, a non-age statement. And I think part of the reason for that now, we're 22, coming on 23 years old. We do have some older whiskies that are coming through. But sometimes some of these older whiskies, they can be a little bit tired. They can lose some of their lively Penderyn character. I would say, when they reach 10, 15, 18, 20 years, some of those casks are really preserved and they're fantastic, and equally other ones are a little bit tired. So often the whiskies we're releasing are 5, 6 years old to sort of preserve that character to the whiskies as well, because of course we want to present that. We're very proud of that.
I hate it when that's looked upon as a bad thing. It's like, no, that's not a bad thing at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a lot more education these days. People seem to be a lot more aware of whiskies from different parts of the world, different regions, different production processes, or different environments that they're matured in. Not necessarily being matured for the same length of time that Scotch whiskey can be. We had a 3-year-old bourbon barrel Penderyn that we'd done as an exclusive for the visitor centre. I used to take it on tastings and present it as like a blind mystery dram at the end. And, I would taste people on it and say, oh, how old do you think it is? And some people would say, oh, I think it's 6 years, 8 years, 10 years. And I'd say, no, that's 3 years old. That's as young as a whiskey is like legally allowed to be. And you would see people's mouths like literally drop open. Like, oh my God, it would completely blow their minds that young whiskey could be that good. So yeah, it's, age is absolutely just a number.
Nothing but a number. I'm just going to read out a few of these comments. And by the way, please do not judge me. But again, because I am on holiday, I will be drinking my whiskey out of this very fancy tumbler.
That's hilarious, because I don't have my normal glass either. I would not normally be drinking whiskey from this kind of glass, although I think this is slightly better than yours.
Still better than this, though, is it? I mean, you could not have picked something worse than that. So I do apologise. I might not be getting as many notes from this particular glass, but they didn't have whiskey, or they didn't have Glencairn. I mean, really, come on, Centre Parks, sort out Glencairn glasses in the cupboard.
You need to start a petition.
Yeah, that's exactly it. There's a few tasting notes coming in already. So I will start to read those out. But I think best if David, you just talk to us a bit about this dram in general.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I started talking about it a little bit earlier. Got a bit ahead of myself. So yeah, this one, the Rich Oak. I actually have a bottle here, amazingly, because I'm not where I'm not at home either. So I was very lucky that I'd left the bottle here. Yeah, the Rich Oak. This is STR cask finished Penderyn. And we called it Rich Oak because at this point, the term STR hadn't even become like a common thing in the whiskey industry at all. So we were thinking about what to name these casks. And I think these STR casks were originally developed for Kavalan, and they used the term Vino Barrique, which also is sort of very vague. So we used the term Rich Oak because we were trying to describe the kinds of flavors that we were getting from these STR casks. And if you're not aware, STR, shaved, toasted, recharred barrels. They're being used a lot more in the whiskey industry, I think in the last 5-8 years, especially by a lot of new distilleries, a lot of distilleries that were involved with Jim Swan, of course, because he pretty much came up with the idea. And it's this idea of taking old red wine casks and you shave out a little bit of the inside of the wood where the red wine's been soaking into the wood to get to a sort of deeper layer of the wood that has a bit more fresh sort of oak wood notes to it. And then you toast it lightly and then heavily char the cask. And that, I think what that's going to give you, I often don't mention red wine at all, actually, when I'm talking about these casks, because I don't think you get a lot of winey flavor to these barrels, these whiskies at all, because that process of then charring the cask, I think really caramelizes not only the natural sugars that are in the wood, but also the wine that's been in the wood as well. So I get a lot of sort of toasty, caramel, toffee, vanilla types of flavors, all the kinds of flavors that you would get out of a new oak cask, but toned down quite significantly. I don't think we've ever used a virgin oak barrel at Penderyn because it would just overwhelm the flavor of our very light whiskey. So these types of flavors, really, these types of casks, the STR casks, help to give those same types of flavors without just overwhelming the whiskey with oak and with spiciness. I do tend to find this whiskey has a little bit more spices than some of our other whiskies. You tend to get this sort of lightly spicy, woody notes to this, and a little bit drying, especially at the end, I think. But yeah, kind of really another really interesting sort of version of our whiskey. And this is a finishing as well. So it normally spends 4 or 5 years in a bourbon barrel, and then 6 months or 12 months in one of these STR casks. Again, we don't tend to want to just overwhelm the whiskey with the flavor of the cask. As I've said, we wanted to sort of preserve the style of our spirit very much as well.
I was about to say it's 5 months kind of where that limit is for you guys, that it would be, as soon as it goes over that 5-month period, is that cask going to really start to affect that house character?
It really, really depends on the cask.
Yeah.
I think some of them are a lot more intense than others. It depends on the level of the char as well, because you could pretty much buy these casks to specifications. So some of them are like level 1 char, some of them are much more heavily charred. So it really depends on that. And we're often combining different ages of whiskies as well. So there might be some whiskey in this batch that is 3 or 4 years old that's going to be bringing that sort of liveliness and that sort of vitality of the Penderyn spirit. And then equally, there's going to be some older whiskey in here as well that will be 8 or 9 years old that's going to be bringing some depth and complexity. So it's sort of combining those two elements together to give something that's tasty and consistent.
It's definitely tasty.
Thank you.
I can't say too much about the nose because it is all but vanishing with my 3 centiliter dram in a Diet Coke glass. But there's, for me on the palate, there's that kind of like that buttered fudge kind of note. There's a little bit of mango in there, kind of dried mango as well. A little bit of kind of green apple. It's like it's really fruity. It's really light and delicate and floral, maybe blossom honey as well.
Floral. Absolutely. I get that.
I'm just going to read out, because we've got quite a lot of tasting notes. So I will read them out. TACD, lovely, rich, sweet, oaky nose on this. Joe F, wonderful, rich, creamy vanilla nose on this with some floral banana. Haha, odd one that. Yes, floral banana. Okay.
Banana, yeah. I often hear banana about Penderyn, actually. It is a note that tends to come out again and again.
Green tea is green. I'm getting more floral, fruity, slightly perfumed nose. Steve Coleman Williams, cherries and foam banana sweets on the nose. There's another one for the banana. Can smell the spiciness of the oak too. Simon, fruity and rich nose. Apple to start, but it's becoming richer as it breeds. Anthony Mullins, I'm getting the smell of a bag of dried fruit you use for baking. Beautiful colour. Joe F, such a lovely fruity and delicate taste on the palate with a lasting slightly oily sweetness. Neil Bolton, banoffee pie on the nose. We could add another banana one in there. Steve Coleman Williams, holy meatballs, Batman. Anyone put this in their mouth yet? Stunning. Proper notes incoming. Love that. Joe F, you really get the STR wine casks on the tail edge of this. That sort of sweet, sour wine fizz. Cool note. Steve Hickson, nice price. This one in the shop. I can't remember the exact pour and sip discount because they do vary, but please do head to the shop if you really do like this, and you will be able to get your member discount on this. Guy CP, pleasantly surprised I didn't get on with the Madeira cask. This will make it to the whiskey shelf. Clive Hampton, the palate is a spicy vanilla creamy taste, quite distinctive. Anthony Mullins, wow, spicy vanilla tart on the taste. There's loads of notes coming in for this one. Greg Ewick, very nicely surprised with this, as the Madeira cask one wasn't for me. Jim Glancy, vanilla and crystallized fruits, really long finish. Steve Coleman Williams, spiced honey and vanilla, like Aberdiffi ice cream in a glass. Is that something I should know? Is it Welsh?
It's not something that I know of. Maybe I should.
Double checking, bro. I don't know what that is, but
I'm gonna have to look that up.
I can definitely sense as well, like the kind of like the vanilla ice cream notes could be there with this one. Anthony Mullins, I feel like this is going to be added to my collection, but does it come in a proper sized bottle? As I have a lovely bottle of Penderyn Legend, but it's too tall to fit on my whiskey shelf. So I think
we've had a few complaints about that. Yeah, funnily enough, I probably shouldn't say this live on air, but we are going to be changing the Dragon range a little bit. They are going to be slightly shorter. These ones as well. These bottles, we call this the Gold range, the Dragon range. You can see the dragon behind me. That's the logo for the Dragon range. You see that on the front of the bottles. This range we call the Gold range are all at 46% alcohol, and these are very slightly shorter, about this much shorter than the Dragon range bottles. So it should fit on a standard whiskey shelf, I would have thought.
Yeah, Seacon Williams. The only Penderyn I have left is from the Welsh Grand Slam with the team signatures on it.
Oh,
Pretty
wow.
sure it's the Madeira cask.
Yeah, if it's closed, that's worth a bit of money. I wouldn't.
That's definitely one you probably don't want to open.
Probably want to keep. Yeah.
This is where Steve suddenly writes back, going, "No, I've opened it." But anyway, whiskey is for opening, but definitely maybe with signatures on, you could probably draw a line there. Neil Bolton, dry sherry-like finish on this. Steve Coleman Williams with a question. So does STR give a bit of a mix between virgin oak and wine cask flavors, or just slightened flavor?
There's a bit of a debate around that. I think some people would say that the STR gives a slightly winey sort of flavor. There's some sort of echo of the sweetness of the wine to these casks. To me personally, I don't get a huge amount of that. I do get much more of the sorts of flavors that you would get from the oak and straight out of the wood, as if nothing had been in it before. That's not to say that the wine hasn't had any effect, because I think that sort of caramelizing of the wine that's been in the wood definitely gives a lot of this caramelly and toffee fruitiness to these whiskies as well. But more research to be done. Just get out there and taste some STR matured whiskies. There's plenty of them to go out these days, and a lot of brand new releases. If you see a very first release from a new distillery that's maybe only 3 years old, a lot of the time now they're using at least a proportion of STR casks as well, because it's quite a good way to give the whiskey a bit more of a maturity at quite a young age still, without overwhelming the whiskey with new oak. So yeah, they're becoming very, very popular. And actually you even see now some of the big companies, big whiskey companies starting to use some of these types of casks as well, which is really cool to see. I think that as we've said, Jim's legacy sort of living on. He's had such a huge impact on the whiskey industry, I think.
That's amazing. Well, there you go, Steve. I mean, there's a bit of research for you to do. What a terrible job for yourself. It's going to be an awful research for you to do there. And lastly, Whiskey Wings dived over from Twitter. I'm biased being Welsh. Just let me get this. There's something blocking this message. But Penderyn produced some great whiskies. The Portwood is glorious. Well, that being said, I'm very conscious of the time. So it's been wonderful talking to you about this dram, David. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will hope to have you on another time soon with some more Penderyn.
Absolutely. No, that sounds fantastic. If I could just try and teach everyone a little bit of Welsh for 1 second. Yes. I'm not actually Welsh myself. I'm English. But I feel like I should at least say Iechyd. Iechyd means cheers in Welsh. So everyone, Iechyd.
Everybody.
Enjoy. Thank you.
Very much for talking to us, David. Cheers.
No.
Well, there you go. Learned about whiskey and learned a little bit of Welsh. What more could you want? So, yes, that was a wonderful dram. At this point here, I'd usually be talking to Jess and we discuss our thoughts, but she's not here. So I'm not going to talk to you about my thoughts by myself. So I'm going to invite Andy from Three Ships over onto the stage. Hello, Andy. How's it going?
Hi, great. Yeah, what a stunning interview with David there. I could have listened for hours to that. That was really cool.
Yeah, we need longer interview slots, longer sessions for these. So we've been to Wales. I mean, this is really going to be a tour over the world. And now we're heading to South Africa. But Andy, I know you're probably sick of hearing this question, and you probably said it a lot of times. But talk to us a little bit about how you got into the whiskey industry and what you were previously doing, because it's quite a unique journey for anybody listening.
Yeah, I was one of those kids at school who wanted to be a professional footballer. I grew up in a small town in Yorkshire called Penistone. And England had won the World Cup for the one and only time. So, yeah, I think every kid wanted to be a professional footballer then. I didn't make it as a professional footballer, but I did as a professional cricketer. And it was in 1982 when I was playing for Derbyshire. And Peter Kirsten, a very well-known South African cricketer, he was also there. And he just said, see what you're doing for the winter. So I said, Kersey, I normally work in a timber yard in Barnsley. Why? He says, no, man, come out to South Africa for a summer, escape the cold English winters. So 2 weeks later, I was in this little place called Wellington, where 41 years later, I'm still in the same place. And yeah, that was the start. It was 6 months in South Africa, got involved with a company called Stellenbosch Farmers Winery on a part-time basis. They were kind of supplementing my income. Came back to the UK, did the same the next year. And I did that for 3 years before I got released by Derbyshire. They signed a guy called Michael Holding. Still to this day, don't understand why they got rid of me. But yeah. And that kind of, I decided then, listen, South Africa is quite a nice place. And I was offered a job with Stellenbosch Farmers Winery full time. So I started with them on the 1st of October, 1984 in their spirit blending cellar. And it was pulling pipes around, making, the different blends of the different spirits. And we had one whiskey on the shelves at that stage. It was the Three Ships Select. The South African whiskey industry is very young. Three Ships was born in 1977. So our whole industry is only around about, 46, 47 years old. And it was while I was in the cellar that each year, because we were making at that stage, Three Ships was bulk Scottish malt whiskey and South African grain whiskey. And we were doing bulk business with Morrison Bumore distillers. And they used to come out on an annual visit to South Africa, their directors. And for some reason, I still don't really know to this date, I was invited to this get-together, probably because I could understand the Scotch and I could speak English, because English wasn't at that stage the first language in this part of the country. And we had a great evening. And at the end of the evening, Brian Morrison just said to me, he says, would I like to come back to Scotland and learn how to make whiskey? And that was really the start. The next morning, I thought everybody would have forgot that conversation. My boss called me in. And between 1985 and 1989, I went across to Morrison's and spent time working at the Ockentoshan, just outside of Glasgow, Lowlands, Old Meldrum, with Glengarry up in the Highlands, just in from Aberdeen. And then on the legendary island of Islay, working at the flagship Beaumont distillery. And that was for a couple of months each year. And then I'd come back to South Africa, go back into the spirit blending cellar. In 1989, Brian sold his business to Suntory. My visits to Scotland stopped, and the business said, okay, you must know everything there is to know about whiskey now. So, we're going to put you in charge of our operations, which were very, very small at that stage. And you're going to improve the quality and the volume of whiskey which we produce. Like David said, I was also very, very fortunate in those early days because, yes, I came back from Scotland thinking I knew everything there was about making whiskey, having worked with, some of those guys and also with Dr. Jim as well. And I came back and obviously made lots of mistakes in those first few months, but seriously, nobody in South Africa had a clue about whiskey back then. So if they had, I think I'd have been fired a dozen times in the first 6 months. I managed to learn from the mistakes I was making. It wasn't as easy back then as it is now. There was no, if you wanted to make a phone call in the late 80s, 90s from South Africa, you went through the local central system, and calls were very expensive. There was no computers, no email, no cell phones. So it was difficult, but it was fun, and we came through that period. And in 1991, I was made the manager of the James Sedgwick Distillery, which I managed for 25 years up until 2016. I then took over. I was moved to a new position as head of whiskey for Distell. Distell was the company formed in 2000 with the merger of Stellenbosch Farmers Winery and Distillers Corporation, two South African companies. I became head of whiskey. We just purchased the 3 distilleries in Scotland, Bunnahabhain, Tobermory, and Deanston. And I did that for 2 years until we got the team settled in Scotland, because obviously they don't need a guy from South Africa helping them there on a daily basis. And then in just before, when COVID came around, I kind of took stock of what was going on. I'd just done 38 years in the industry. I was coming up to retirement anyway. We have a compulsory retirement age in South Africa. And I talked to the business, and we said, okay, they will let me take early retirement. But then they brought me back on a full-term contract for 12 months, which ended at the end of 2022. By that stage, I had set up my own business. Distell were very interested in signing an agreement with my business. So a lot of my work now under the Watts Whisky Company is still providing strategy guidance for our South African whiskey range. Because as you know, if you made something 3-4 years ago, it's your baby until it's launched. We could be 10-12 years down the line. So I'm still heavily involved with Distell, who are now going to become Heineken. And yeah, exciting times. Also now being in that position where I can help other craft distillers in South Africa as well. We are the only commercial whiskey distillery on the continent. By commercial, I mean there are products available in most bottle stores, supermarkets throughout the country. But there are a few small craft distillers which are starting up now. So I think it's exciting times ahead for our industry in South Africa to not just have the one big player. And I'm going to enjoy, helping these guys over the next few years. I'm sure about that.
That's really great to hear. And hopefully we get to be trying more South African whiskey, being that it's not been exactly known all this time for its whiskey. But in saying that, and when you came onto the James Sedgwick Distillery and with 3 ships, you're now making what makes it a particularly South African whiskey now, basically?
Sure. Good question. But I don't think when we started we were, because whiskey wasn't a popular drink in South Africa until the late 1990s. And then all of a sudden, whiskies which had stayed away from South Africa during the dark years started to come back. Whiskey grew amongst the emerging, black market. Disposable income became more So whiskey rocketed to volumes it had never been seen before. So when we started with 3 ships, it was traditionally along the Scottish style, using Scottish malt with South African grain. As we upgraded the distillery, put new equipment in, 2010 was a major year when we upsized just about everything on the distillery, including 2 new pots from Forsyth in Scotland. And then it was, from the early 2000s where I started to look at, other styles. So we created Bain's Cape Mountain whiskey, which is also available in the UK, which is totally different to 3 ships. And also with 3 ships over the last, 10 years, I've created what's known as the Masters Collection, which is a range of whiskies which are low volume, but always something different, using different cask finishes, things which haven't been done before, if possible. In 2015, 16, for example, we released a South African 15-year blend, 3 ships blend, but we finished it in Pinotage red wine cask, which is a South African grape varietal. So there's lots of things we're trying, and the education level of the consumer in South Africa is growing. There's a big solid whiskey base now. So I really think, I always say I'm in the twilight of my career, but I think South African whiskey is just in the dawn of its exciting times ahead.
Absolutely. And hopefully we see more exciting things coming out of South Africa. We've had so many different countries that you just would not have expected whiskey to be produced in during Pour and Sip over our time. So it's really exciting to find new world whiskey and it to be celebrated like this. And people just want to try new whiskey, from different countries. It's really exciting.
Yeah, one of our biggest hurdles has actually been, the UK and Europe is a 700 ml bottle size, where South Africa is 750. We also have a higher alcohol strength in South Africa. Our minimum strength is 43, where the UK, Europe is 40. Obviously, the alcohol doesn't play a role, but the bottle sizing does. So the 3 ships 12-year-old, which made it to the shores as an exclusive for the UK and EU, much to the displeasure of a lot of South African whiskey lovers, is a totally different bottle to what the 3 ships range is in South Africa. But it's all about what's inside the bottle, not necessarily the shape and the attraction of the packaging. But I try to put the fires out on this side by saying, but guys, you've got so many whiskies here which are available to you, which these guys overseas can't taste. So there's enough people traveling. If you really want to get hold of this 12-year-old, it's not difficult to get somebody to put a bottle in their suitcase and bring it back for you to South Africa. But give these guys, and Dave was one of them. Dave Worthington, who you're going to be talking to a bit later. He's always been a big promoter of what we're trying to do in South Africa. He's been fortunate enough to visit the distillery, and we built up a really good relationship over the years. So it's it was a kind of a case of a bit of social media pressure about why can't we get your whiskies in the UK, and hopefully now with a company the size of Heineken, it makes things a little bit easier to get offshore to other markets. So let's hope that's the case.
Well, hopefully we'll be seeing more and more. So let's talk about this particular dram that we're drinking tonight, 3 ships, the 12-year-old. There's tasting notes coming through already, and I would like to go through them. But let's just talk about the dram first, and I'll give it a wee sniff and a wee taste.
Yeah, I mean, when I was growing up, whiskey was not part of let's say my regular diet, and my first introduction to whiskey was not necessarily a good one. And that was not the whiskey's fault. That was youthful exuberance. But as I got into the industry on this side and spending time in Scotland with some amazing people, I mean, Jim McHugh was the manager of Bowmore at that stage. David Gressick, their chief chemist. Alistair Ross, a larger-than-life industry legend. Working with those people, I came back with and especially after my time on Islay, a love for the island, for the people, and for their whiskies. So you'll see in a lot of the 3 ships range a smoky DNA, and I think that's what you'll pick up on this one. Not necessarily the super peaty medicinal notes, but a smoky ash, kind of soft leather notes which are coming through. With a lot of the other whiskies I'm doing now, obviously I'm moving away from that style because that was my style of whiskey. I'm now making styles where I believe our market, would like to enjoy as well. So really great opportunities here, because again, the James Sedgwick Distillery, which is, what I'm attached to, it's one of the few whiskies in the world which actually does malt and grain whiskey. So, for 2 months a year, we do pot distilled malt whiskey. And for 9 months of the year, we do column distilled grain. And then for, the remaining month, we split 2 weeks of maintenance in the middle of the year, the end of the year. So we're very fortunate. So I'm capable. We have the capabilities here to produce just about any style of whiskey which you want.
That sounds awesome. I'm going to start reading some of the tasting notes that are coming through, because there are quite a lot. Let me just get to the bottom. Yeah, Joe F. It's such a soft yet enveloping peat on the nose. This is you saying. I know we don't look too much into this number, but reading is Benrinnes, the barley is peated around 30 ppm. Yeah. So we're not expecting, like you were saying, we're not expecting those huge Islay medicinal notes. This is a much more kind of aromatic kind of smoke. It's much more delicate, but it's really wonderful, and it's really well balanced within the dram. It's definitely not a blow your socks off peat that we're getting here. Whiskey Wings, Andy Watts, an utter gentleman in producing magic. So there you go. Richard Wingrove, yes, I love the aroma on this one. Neil Bolton, very different nose, intriguing. Green tea is green. I do like a peaty nose. Daniel Markland, 3 things come to mind with this: TC and P. So that's going against what I was just saying. So you're getting those TCB notes, which is the kind of classic thing that I'd get from a Lafroig, for example. Not. But there's definitely, if you're as well, if you're not used to the peat as much, then you might be getting those more medicinal notes. Steve Coleman Williams, kinds of weird burning paper smoke, quite wispy. Apricot and peaches are there, but need hunting for. Anthony Mullins, I find the peat softens very quickly to reveal a sweet smell. Joe F, it's an unusual but very pleasant taste. So much black pepper spice, thick honey, and caramel, with that ever-present gentle, thick peat. Your Uncle Vanya, dusty, burning rubber glazed with honey. Joe F. Oh, now a bit of water in this really enhances the flavour, I think. Yeah, this is bottled at 46.3%. I mean, usually with water would, like a couple of drops of water is definitely going to open this up. What do you think about that, Andy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's 46.3. It's non-chill filtered, natural colour. And it was actually interesting today because somebody sent me a link to a review of this whiskey by Ralphie.
Okay.
Yeah. Ralphie reviewed it number 863 of his reviews. And he actually pointed out something today which I'd never noticed. And that is that on the bottle, the marketing team and myself, who totally missed it because I normally have to, crit the labels. On the label, nowhere stands natural color, non-chill filtered. It stands on the box, which it comes in, but it doesn't stand on the bottle. And Ralphie was saying that, the bottle and box are parted at a very early time in a whiskey consumer's journey. It's out the box is gone. So it's something I picked up. So I'll have to bring that tomorrow now, or when we finish the Easter weekend, I'll bring that to our marketer's attention and see if we can't get the label changed for the next batch.
Yeah, we'll change the next batch.
But the tasting notes, I'm just looking at what I put down when I first reviewed it. Now, I've always said, to me, whiskey is so subjective that my tasting notes, if I give them, are to point you in a direction. But there's so many things which your audience has touched on there, like the pepper, the dried peaches, the earthiness, the smoke, all of that, floral mocha notes, soft leather, which I said earlier. Those are coming through, which is fantastic. I'm glad that they're seeing what I'm seeing.
There's a lot more notes to come as well, and I bet your marketing team are really happy with Ralphie right now. They're sitting there going,
I don't even listen. I don't even think they know who Ralphie is, to be perfectly honest. It's Distell it's quite a big company with a very diversified portfolio. And back to what I said very early, I pretty much had a blank canvas, and still to this day, I think whiskey is probably 2% of Distell's business. Now moving into Heineken, which is 35 times the size of Distell. You can imagine what the focus on whiskey might be. So I'm hoping it's going to be very positive. We'll see.
Steve Coleman Williams, light but kind of creamy too in the mouth. Lovely cracked pepper and salted caramel flavour. TACD, a very gentle, welcoming smokiness. Lovely. Simon, getting a lot of pepper on the palate. Not the sweet notes others mentioned yet, but the nose is lovely, sweet, slightly smoky. Joe F, how does the aging process differ from a place like Scotland, considering the difference in climate? That's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question. We lose on average between 4.5% to 5% per year. Scotland 1.5% to 2%. So yes, in our climate, it's especially Wellington, it's very hot. We regularly get 40 degrees centigrade in summer. We're now moving into winter where we'll probably average around about 16 to 18. With a lot more moisture in the air because we're a winter rainfall area. But yeah, things happen just a lot quicker here. That interaction between the wood, the spirit, the atmosphere is going at such a pace. And a good point what David said, when we have taken whiskies to older ages, we've just released a 3 Ships 21-year-old single malt on this side. And to get that to 21 years old, I used 4 sets of casks because the casks do tire quickly because they're working so hard. So great question. Yeah, the Angels are quite thirsty on this down here, the tip of Africa, and it's a challenge, but it's one we've embraced. We don't temperature control our warehouses, but we do build them properly. We've got cavity walls, we've got thick ceilings, so we kind of monitor what's going on inside there with thermal hydrographs, temperature, humidity. We track that. And we tend to find that the stores stay around the 22 to 24 degrees on an average throughout the year. Humidity around about 75, 80. But still, the Angels are thirsty.
Yes, absolutely. So I hope that answers your question, Joe. Anthony Mullins, lastly, very peppery taste, but with a couple of drops of water, I find it softens this to bring out the caramel. Daniel Markman, the TCP was string on the opening of the dram, but mellowed out once I had time to breathe. Yankel Banya, this is quite so nice and hoppy on the palate. Toasted hops. Neil Bolton, this one grows on you each sip and it's getting better. Clive Hampton, lovely all-round whiskey with a nice gentle amount of smoke. I don't think Michael Holding makes whiskey this good.
No, I think he made a very good career out of cricket.
Yeah. Okay. He didn't need to go to the whiskey industry now. Everything would have been so different if Michael Holding hasn't have been signed for Derby. Daniel Markland, this may actually become a favourite of mine. So there you go. All awesome stuff. So what does the future hold? We've spoken a bit about you, but what does the future hold for 3 Ships? Is there anything exciting that we can expect coming out?
Yeah, I mean, 3 Ships. We've got in South Africa. We have there's constant releases. We do collaborations with some of the big whiskey retailers where we will do special bottlings for them. So there's lots happening in South Africa. So again, if people who are traveling from South Africa back to the UK, then just ask them to. If you go onto 3 Ships' website, you'll see the amazing range of whiskies which we do have. But I think our core market in South Africa is like everywhere. We've got a couple of solid blends which keep the distillery wheels turning. But there'll always be new expressions each year to kind of keep the excitement going. And yeah, hopefully, it's not going to happen overnight because obviously if a company the size of Heineken decides to take whiskey seriously, then, we didn't know that 10 years ago or even 3 years ago. So there will be a kind of a lag period, but, we never rush in whiskey. It's a lifetime of patience. And, if that's the case, then I would think that the world can expect pretty good stuff from us going forward. Yeah, 3 Ships is very established in this country. It's a strong brand. Our whiskey is around about 18% of our local market. Whiskey is the largest spirit segment in South Africa, but still dominated by Scottish and Irish. There's still a very big education drive needed with a lot of consumers. Being a relatively young whiskey drinking country, we still tend to find that the consumer does drink with their eyes. The largest advertising budgets, it's like moths around the light. They tend to get the consumer. And then obviously they stick with them because the brands are amazing brands. So really, you know, our biggest challenge is not necessarily making good whiskey anymore. You know, the World Whiskey Awards and competitions throughout the world tell us that. It's changing perceptions. And that's the exciting bit. That's the bit I love. Talking like tonight, talking that last night, I was with a bunch of South African people. Some of them never tried Three Ships. A lot to say about it, but never tried it. And then, you know, once they have tried it, you know, it's like a new world. It's like a light bulb goes on in their head.
Well, that's exactly. I mean, Daniel said this here might become his actual favourite, and lots of people being really surprised by this one. So that's doing your job well, changing it as we speak. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful to speak to you, Andy. Thank you so much for coming on and speaking to us. I hope you enjoy your holiday tomorrow.
Yeah. Thanks very much. It's been great chatting to you.
We will hope to have you on again at some point soon. Thank you so much.
That would be nice. Thank you, Ed. Thanks.
Right. Okay. So we've been to Wales, we've been to South Africa, and we're finally stepping into Bedfordshire to speak to David. So how are you, David?
Fine and dandy, thanks. It was the Dave and Andy show tonight.
The Dave and Andy show tonight. That's
double
exactly
Dave and double Andy.
I hadn't realised that one. Yes, such common names that we have.
Yeah. You are just 3.5 miles away from me. I think I could walk in just under an hour. I could bring a Glencairn and a bottle of whiskey.
Well, I wish I had phoned you beforehand and said, "Can you just get me some Glencairns at least?"
Yeah.
Because Centre Parks really need to up their game.
Yeah. Right. That was interesting. Right. I mean, the South African whiskey, I'm a big fan, and I say I have visited the distillery and what they're making there. The blends are superb. But yes, what we're getting over here has been great.
Yes, absolutely. It's fascinating to talk to Andy. All awesome stuff. So, Dave, you have been on with us before, and a lot of people will know you, but not everyone will. So I think it's important that you just discuss for us who you are and how you found yourself in this position. The classic.
My name's Dave Worthington. I am a whiskey ambassador for Atom Group. Atom Brands. My key role in the UK is the global brand ambassador for that boutique whiskey company, the independent bottler. So we bottle whiskey from all around the world. I'm just a whiskey geek, just passionate about great whiskey. I started a whiskey blog a long time ago, a little whiskey blog called Whiskey Discovery, and just gradually fell into the industry, just the right place, right time. I wanted to go to a whiskey show. I wanted to work a whiskey show after doing it for a number of different years, different shows, different people, and called up Maverick Drinks and asked if they needed any help at Whiskey Live. I think it was 7 years ago. And they said, yeah, come along. We've got boutique whiskey. Of course, I knew all about them because I'd been at the previous show and met them when they first showed. And then I started working for them on a part-time basis, just doing their shows that they'd committed for that year. And halfway through that year, they just said, how would you like to do this full-time, Dave? So, here I am, just a passionate whiskey geek. You can see me in my little Bedfordshire office, just surrounded by whiskey and whiskey books all around me. Just passionate about whiskey from all over the world. We're, as an independent bottler, I am passionate about world whiskey. I'm passionate, Welsh whiskey. They were on the scene before the English whiskey scene started. They were the first distillery outside of Scotland in British Isles mainland sort of thing. They started in 2000, English whiskey 2006. So there's a lot of great whiskey out there, huge amount of great whiskey.
That's exactly it. And a lot of it's been bottled by the boutique whiskey company as well. So
a lot of it's being bottled by lots of great distilleries and independent bottlers. Yeah, but we're passionate about bottling great whiskey.
Absolutely. So I think we're going to let's just get into this dram. Now you can get as geeky as you like with us, David, on this one. So let's talk about the worm tub 10 and just talk to us. What is a worm tub?
Okay, a worm tub. Yeah, I get asked a lot this at whiskey shows, and I found that worm tub whiskey, they feature high up in my favourite distilleries. Quite often I'm asked what's my favourite whiskey, and I'll always reply usually the next one. If someone asks me what my favourite distilleries are, I will list a number of distilleries that have worm tubs, and they can be very, very different, but there is an underlying feature character that does come across with all of them. What you may ask is a worm tub. Well, it is a really beautiful piece of traditional distilling equipment. It's a piece of engineering. It is a long copper coiled tube, which is known as the worm, that just comes off the top of the still, off the top of the swan neck and over the lie pipe, and generally outside the distillery. It disappears outside the distillery and turns into a big coil. And that coil is submerged into a tub of cold water that turns those vapors into the spirit. They sort of impart a more distinctive, more robust flavors. They can. There's lots of different ways you can do that. But generally a shell and tube condenser, it's a more modern piece of equipment, much more efficient, and you tend to get lighter flavors off of a shell and tube, and you get the heavier flavors off of worm tubs. Most distilleries ripped out their worm tubs in the 50s and 60s and 70s as they were modernizing, as the Scotch whisky boom was growing. If you want to think of a worm tub, think of a moonshine still that's normally set next to a running water, and there's a little still and then a barrel that's a coil of copper is going through that, and the water's coming in the barrel and overflowing, and then the spirit's coming off of one side. You need running water for this. There are 18 distilleries in Scotland. There's a few more actually now. I think there's 2 more that have been added. 18 distilleries in Scotland that still use worm tubs. One famously ripped out their worm tubs, did some distillation and thought, this isn't the same spirit. That's how Dalwhinnie did that. This isn't the same spirit we had, and put the worm tubs back in at huge expense, ripping them all out. Some of them are beautiful works of art, and some of them are very industrial, great tanks. And there's a number of things that a distiller can do. I mean, in all of the variables of distilling whiskey, from the shape of the still, the fermentation, the yeast, all of these different things, all of those different things that increase reflux. Worm tubs is about reflux, and distillers can use worm tubs to help create different characters. They can use really cold water in the tub and make it rapidly go through, and then condensing will take place really quickly, resulting in a heavy sulphury spirit. Things like Craigellachie, Glenkinchie and Speyburn are generally good examples of this. Some distilleries like Malt, for example, they spray cold water onto the line arm just before it descends into the worm tub. And that speeds up condensing even more, helping to give that sort of distillery's meatiness, which we all know, more like as the Beast of Dufton. Now, if you slow that rate right down, it's up, which prolongs that interaction with the copper. It takes longer for that vapor to condense. And so it's the vapors talking to the copper, and those fractions are being removed. And this helps to make a lighter style of spirit, although it's always going to be relatively heavier than a light spirit made in the distillery with a shell and tube type of condenser. People who do that, Glenelgin, one of my favorite distilleries, Glenelgin, it's got that lightness of Speyside, but that complexity of the worm tub. So it's heavier than a light Speyside distillery. Oban and Royal Lochnagar as well have that sort of really slow interaction, so you get a lighter style of spirit but still heavy in comparison. So that's a little bit about worm tubs.
Yeah, and I mean that's really interesting stuff, and it's really helpful to know. So when trying this on the palate, when nosing this, what can we expect that worm tub to have given this particular whiskey?
Well, it's going to give a lot of body in the palate and the structure. It's a very, very big, bold, and this one has been bottled at batch strength. We've got natural cask strength. It's natural colour. It's a beautiful, beautiful colour. It has been finished in sherry butts, sherry casks. When we have bottled this at 56.8%, so it's about.
So there's probably some people that might want to think about adding a couple of drops of water to this one. However, I do like to try them always, regardless of the alcohol strength.
Yes,
I do like to try it neat first.
This is, it's a gorgeous bottle, a little punt on the bottom there, a very, very simple label with the worm basically running around here. That's the copper pipe running around there. You can just see the gold bits of copper running around the label there. It is from an undisclosed Speyside distillery. So if you're feeling lucky, there are 8 distilleries in Speyside that still use worm tubs. One of them we can discount immediately because it's too new, Ballanduck. Although they must be getting close to 10 years now, they haven't released a whiskey. So, you know, Speyburn, Glenelgin, I mentioned, Mortlach, I mentioned, Balmanic, Benrinnes, Cragganmore, and Craigellachie. They're the sort of the 8 distilleries in Speyside that still use worm tubs.
So are we giving our subscribers a quiz, an option to maybe guess where they think that this has possibly come from?
It's not really important, because I'm hoping that we can use other distilleries in different batches, because these are all small batch.
So in batch one, was it a different distillery?
No, the batch 1 and 2 were definitely the same distillery as far as I'm aware. They were very, very similar profiles, but just because we're bottling them in small batches, they will be slightly different, because
Sure.
it's a marriage of a number of casks put together. There may be a slightly different ABV, but they'll all be a minimum age of 10. There is a 12-year-old single cask that we've just released as well, which is a single cask 12-year-old, and that is also from this same distillery as far as I'm aware.
Okay, that sounds interesting as well. So, I mean, with my horrific glass here, the prominent note I'm getting is this wonderful orange peel nose and kind of cacao powder.
Yeah, it's quite nutty with the sherry. I'm getting those sort of walnut oil earlier when I first put this in the glass. Lots of medjool dates for me on the nose, really thick dates. Yes, I see that really thick, spicy orange, like a Demerara orange marmalade, that really dark marmalade rather than the light golden shred, that really dark marmalade. That's definitely coming in.
Absolutely. I'm going to read a few of the notes coming out now before I go into the palate. So, rich TACD, rich woody nose, very promising. Joe F, I'm getting so much butter on the nose, like a really buttery croissant. Joe F, whoa, now that's got a punch on the palate. Big alcohol.
Yes. I do think it does need a little. I think it opens up nicely with a drop of water, and I'm just got my teaspoon here. It's much easier.
Yes. There is a reason that we order the whiskies as we do. We were never going to start with this one for you guys to begin and then have the Penderyn afterwards. So there is some logic in the orders of these things. Simon, hints of orange in the nose. Guys, a heavy, complex nose, a toffee hint on the nose. Anthony Mullins, I'm getting shortbread on the nose. Neil Bolton, caramelized orange peel on the nose. Clive Hampton, yes, getting orange on the nose and more obvious in the palate. It seems to be the most common note at the moment here is orange.
I've just added some water, and lots of dark chocolate is now starting to come through. And those little bits because of those orange hints that we picked up a little earlier, it is like a Terry's chocolate orange, the dark one. Always one of my favorites when I was a lot younger.
Now you're talking, because that is absolutely one of my favorite chocolates. Anything chocolate orange is right up my street. Green tea is green, nose, fruit bread in the nose, on the tongue. The orange comes out much more. Will Bolton, big hitter on the palate. Simon, getting cherry on the palate, sharp, proper wake-up call. And green tea is green, and toffee. Richard Wingro, loads of notes coming through for this. Getting a lot of orange and pepper. TACD, wow, that's fruity and delicious. Just check the price. What a steal.
It is a steal, yes. Yeah.
So what is this retailing at normally before a Pour and Sip store?
I think it's £50.
Okay, for this is a really, really good price for this one.
I think it's $49.95. I think it's £50. Yeah, it's a good price. Yeah, I mean, it's just 100% old school's type of whiskey, no added colouring, no chill filtration, and really it's about raising a glass to the glory of the worm tub. And for you to really go out and start seeking other worm tub distilleries. And
why do you think many distilleries have got rid of their worm tubs?
Really, because I think because of the flavour profile of whiskey drinkers around the world changed. It's really about, it's interesting, you know, when I listed that big long list of Speyside ones, and if you add the other ones like Dalwhinnie, Edradour, Glenkinchie, Knockdu, Oban, a lot of these distilleries are using worm tubs in like their signature malts out of blends. So they add that body and robustness to a lighter blend. At the same time, you're using all the other malts to back that up. But they generally use a bit of worm tub whiskey to give that blend body. That's what it's all about. I say there are two new distilleries. The old distilleries, Brora and Rosebank, are now back on that worm tub list. New distilleries, worm tubs were always in Rosebank and Brora, and so they're bringing them back. Certainly Rosebank are bringing 3 back, 1 for each of the stills. I know Brora's up and running. I couldn't find any evidence of recent worm tubs at Port Ellen, and that's another distillery that is coming back. And currently the only worm tub on Islay is the Ardnahoe distillery. They decided to put worm tubs in when they reopened. And there is another little distillery called Aveen Jarek out in the Hebrides, and they have worm tubs as well, but it's a tiny little farm distillery.
So this, I mean, so this should give you a journey into many more distilleries that are producing, a worm tub discovery. Edradour being absolutely one of my absolute favourites, and it's that absolute wonderful meaty note you get from that particular whiskey. Joe F, I'm with Andy on the tasting styles. I have 2 sips neat and then 2 sips with water to get a good range of notes. Steve Coleman Williams, I need a pipette. You don't have to have a pipette. Dave used a spoon.
I always use a teaspoon because I can always find a teaspoon. It's so much easier. You can control it. I've got a beautiful little jug made by a friend of mine. But pouring out of a jug, I'm still too clumsy for that. So it's much easier just to get a teaspoon, and you can just add a little drop, and you can always find a teaspoon.
Yes, and remember, you can always add more water should you need it, but if you add too much, you can drown the whiskey, and that's the last thing that we want. But definitely start small with that. Joe F, it was such a heavy, bold and heavy flavour profile for such a good price. Neil Bolton, I'm a finger dropper. Can't remember what that's in reference to. Is that water?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's dip your finger in the glass
dip and then finger in. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
There you go. That's
Make sure you wash your hands first.
Make sure you wash your hands first. That's another technique you may want to use, but please do wash your hands. TACD, this is the winner. I think this is going to be a new favourite. Steve Coleman Williams, big booze, big fruit, dark fruits, forest gatto, and hints or Parma ham.
Okay, that meatiness transferring. Yeah, I definitely get the Black Forest Gatto, those sort of chocolatey cherry notes. I mean, for me, dates, and I do love a medjool date. There's a malty sort of caramel level in this, and there's a little bit of that sort of licorice coming in on the finish there.
Yes, Jason Copper, burnt toffee and buttered tea cakes. Neil Bolton, this is my favourite, jam-packed with flavour. Richard Wingrove, I was hoping not to spend too much on whiskey this month, but that plan may have been scuppered. Steve Coleman Williams, I've run out of storage space, so need to drink more before I buy more. I need more Lego storage too. What do you do, Dave, in this situation? Do you just make storage space, or do you drink up?
Well, I've moved all the children out, so all the spare bedrooms now are whiskey rooms. So it's simple.
Well, there you go, everybody. If you do have children, just move them out, and then there will be more room for whiskey. Neil Bolton, too tempting. We'll be buying this one. Your Uncle Banyu is telling everybody it's £39.95 in the members store. People, that's a decision made. No excuses. I have to say that's a phenomenal price for whiskey such as this one. There you go. So it would be great discounts for it. And Anthony Mullins, why didn't I save this for my Easter egg on Sunday? Would go so well with dark chocolate. Absolutely. I think this is.
Oh, absolutely. It goes so well with chocolate. And you know what the best chocolate pairing for any whiskey, just about any whiskey, is Maltesers. That's other round chocolate flavored balls are available, I'm sure, but Maltesers and whiskey just go together so well.
I think with this one, something like a really, really high percentage dark chocolate would be wonderful.
Proper dark chocolate.
Proper dark chocolate. And Greg Buick, all hail the worm tub. This one is lovely, rich fruit, nuts, and gorgeousness. That's exactly what you're saying, Dave. This is one of those things that kind of raise awareness of the worm tub, but kind of, celebrate it.
Those big fruity, nutty notes are coming from the sherry casks. They're coming from the Oloroso. Oloroso is very, very nutty. and obviously very, very fruity. So you get, that's what the Oloroso cask is bringing. The worm tub is bringing that meatiness, that underlying robustness to the spirit. Because if you go and taste a Glenelgin or a Glenkinchie, you're going to get a much lighter, because of the way they condense their spirit using their worm tubs. It's slightly different, a warmer liquid coming down there. The vapors hang around a bit longer before they condensed. When we go to a big meaty mortlach, the Beast of Dufton, as it's known, because they spray that lye pipe with water before it even gets to the worm tub, it's already starting to condense in the pipe, and you're getting those sulfury compounds coming across, which in the new make spirit you'll taste immediately, and in some casks you will taste, but over the time that turns into that really robust flavored spirit that you know from those sort of distilleries.
Absolutely. And I mean, I like all whiskey, but obviously I have a real soft spot and real love for really meaty, old school meaty drams, like the Mortlach 16, like a Edredauer sherry cask, kind of cask strength, and something like this, which has that wonderful meatiness to it. It tastes old school, and I love it. It's right up there. Proper sherry cask, and yeah, lovely stuff. Dave, it's been wonderful speaking to you. I'm very aware of the time, and we still have 2 drams to talk about, which I might not be drinking because I'm already 3 drams down. So I have to say, but thank you so much for talking us through the world of worm tubs. When can we expect batch 3?
Oh, well, as soon as, well, I'm sure that's underway. I mean, we've got lots of casks sitting in store, finishing up in our Edinburgh plant. So yeah, there's lots of stuff going on at the moment.
Awesome. Well, we look forward to that. Thank you so much for talking to us. And I will hopefully see you soon. And keep up with the David Lynch-esque coffee updates in the morning on Instagram.
Oh, yeah, I decided to start talking rather than I always used to type on Twitter every morning, good morning and how's things going. I just thought, well, it's just easier just to sit in front of the camera, and then I don't have to do this. Can't see the keyboard in the morning. And then we share it on Twitter and Instagram and everything all at the same time. So yeah, that's the story. That's the story behind it.
There you go. Keep it up. Thank you so much for talking to us, Dave. Cheers.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely to see you, Andy. And yeah, how long are you over the road for? Just a weekend?
I'm going home tomorrow.
Oh, right.
So it's been wonderful, actually. It's been very nice to get away from the big smoke, as it were.
Oh, you should have called earlier then. Yeah.
In the forest. Yes, we could have done some early drinking at this stage, because I have to say the selection here of booze, I really should have bought something from back home.
Always take a bottle.
Always take it. It's a lesson learned, because I had to go to the supermarket, and like I said, there was either
Jameson's, with my own coffee. Always travel.
It was Jameson's, Bell's, or Jura Journey. So I went for the Jura Journey, obviously, but I still should have bought something from back home. Let's be frank here. Thank you so much, Dave. Cheers, and thank you, and all the best.
Good night, y'all.
Right, guys, we are speeding towards the end of this tasting session. Just a few more comments coming in. Joe F3 is my tasting night maximum. 5 is my maximum with proper preparation. Like I said, I'm just going to do a very brief whistle-stop tour of these last 2 drams. You don't have to drink them. You can drink them at your leisure. You can save them for later. Just going to give you a little brief bit of information about them, and then we'll head on. Yanko Vanya saying, thank you, Dave. Simon, it's a long weekend. I'm saving the other 2 for tomorrow. Good idea. Joe F, yeah, my body's able to process alcohol annoyingly fast, so I get the hangover before the night is over. Really gets in the way of a good evening. There you go. Steve Conwell Williams telling me, Andy, that is where hip flasks are really handy. Again, should have brought a hip flask with me here for these walks in the forest. Anyway, I'm just going to start, and we are going to start talking about the Old Pulteney. And this is a really awesome whiskey, actually. I've tried a little bit from the other range, the other release of this one. It's one of my favourite distilleries. It's one of Scotland's most northerly mainland distilleries, found in the historic Caithness fishing port, and it was built there in 1826. Now, this is a new series for Old Pulteney, and it's called the Coastal Range, and it's celebrating coasts around the world, and particularly the impact of that the North Air Sea has on this particular distillery's own maturation. And given that's the house style of Old Pulteney, whenever we think of it, we call it the maritime malt. Had that very, very classic sea air note in this whiskey. This is a cool new series to celebrate this, and this particular release begins its life in bourbon casks before it is then transferred into French oak barrels from the oceanic Charente region. So I apologize if I'm pronouncing this wrong, and that's just north of Bordeaux. And these barrels had previously held Pinot de Charantes. Now, I'm not a wine connoisseur, so please beg my pronunciation of this one. And it's a rare French aperitif made from fresh or unfermented grape juice that's been fortified with cognac de vie. So I have to say that I tried this one earlier, and I might have left my notes here somewhere, but was quite a big fan. And as Dave is pointing out, it is another distillery that uses worm tub still. So there you go. Now, it is very apparent that wonderful sea air kind of note, which I love. There's a real sweetness that I thought was given to it by this particular wine, a kind of tangy balsamic note as well, buttered popcorn. All in all, an absolutely wonderful dram. So cheers. I hope you enjoy that one, because I really did. And lastly, we are heading to Anok, which is not to be confused, as it is part of the Nokdu distillery. And they've been releasing Anok since 1994, and it's to differentiate from the Nokandu distillery. And the malts from this distillery are on the border between the East Highlands and Speyside, and they're light, fruity, and aromatic. The actual distillery Nokdu is close to the Huntly at the foot of the Nok Hill, from where its name is derived. Nokdu is pronounced Nokdu, and it means small black hill. And the single malt from Nokdu operates under the name Anok. So it's pronounced Anok. There's a silent C in there. It's an annual production of 2 as a wash and a spirit still, and they produce just under 1 million litres of whiskey a year. We have actually spoken about this particular distillery before, and we've had it a couple of times on Pour and Sip. The water comes from a nearby source at Nok Hill. And yeah, this is an 18-year-old which has been matured in a combination of sherry oak, Spanish oak casks, and American oak barrels, and it brings this kind of wealth of spicy, chocolatey, and tropical notes to it. And as Dave has mentioned again, it seems like there are lots of distilleries that still use worm tubs, as this is the next one that also uses a worm tub. So I hope you enjoy those ones. Those are both great drams. I have to say, the Old Portney actually for me is one of my favourites anyway. It's a particularly amazing dram, this one. So part of a new series of theirs, which they don't often release series like this. It's kind of been a classic range for Old Portney. So it's really exciting to see them release a new range like this. So thank you so much for listening to that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Andy and Dave back onto the screen before I ask a very mean question. I think David from Benrinnes had to go. How are we both?
Yep, still good. Thanks, Andy.
Still good, still listening.
Yeah,
and as you said, the 2 cracking distilleries that use worm tubs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned, what's my favourite distillery as well. Yeah, Old Portney is definitely one of those distilleries that I love. Scottish distilleries. Yeah,
absolutely. Same here. What about you, Andy? What have you tried any great Scotch recently? Anything that's really impressed you?
Sure. Yeah, obviously not too much gets across my desk unless I've been over there myself. But yeah, I think I'm still kind of stuck in those. When I do buy, I've got my firm emotional favorites. I love the work Robert Fleming has done for many years for Anguston Deer, Tom and Towel, and Glencadam. Stephen Woodcock, great friend of mine, who's now up at Glenmorangie, along with Ian, who's the brand ambassador. Moore obviously still has a very soft spot for me. So yeah, I mean, obviously I'm partial to trying anything if it comes across my path, because that's what whiskey is. It's a journey. It's not about, if you're only drinking one, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's a wonderful journey, and taking responsibility can last you a lifetime.
That's absolutely. However, I do have to say that I have to ask a question that goes against everything you just said, Andy. But yeah, whiskey is a journey, and we love whiskey, and there's so many different styles. It's impossible to say this one's my favorite, that was my favorite. However, we do always ask at the end of these questions, and as some people are already preempting the question, we would like to ask, what has been your favorite from tonight's box? And I have to say, it's particularly difficult tonight because they've all been so different. But Please let us know which one has been your favourite from tonight's box, and I will read those out. I can see some of you already commenting, and our guests will not be offended. Dave, what was your experience like going to visit Andy and the distillery in South Africa?
Oh, that was amazing. Yeah, well, Andy's been a friend for a long time. So, yeah, I was doing some work out in South Africa. I was actually at a show in Johannesburg, and I asked if I could get down to Cape Town. And we sorted out some tastings in Cape Town as well. And then I said, well, and Andy said, yeah, come on up to the distillery. Yeah, we'll sort you out, which he did. And yeah, it was amazing. Yeah, the two pot stills, two identical pot stills. They both can do wash and spirit. To see the column stills, and yes, it's amazing. It is amazing. The warehouses, the angel share that hits you in the morning. I've been to Scottish warehouses and I've been to American warehouses, but that angel share that hits you. And I went in August time, didn't I?
Yeah, so that's right. Yeah, winter.
It's coming into winter, wasn't it? But yeah, it just it hits you. These casks are palletized. How high?
6 high. So it's about 5.4 meters to the base of the top pallet.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous smell when you walk into there. Yeah, it's a beautiful distillery. The gardens are just immaculate. The building, the great big cooling lake out the front, it's just so pretty, really picturesque. Yeah, it's two modern pot stills in there, and yeah, you haven't got a mash tun as such, have you?
Not as in the. I think that is one of the things, Dave, when I came back from Scotland, is that, you know, you come back after working with legends there and you have so much respect for the people and the tradition. But when you start in a journey of your own, as long as you stay within the legislation, you can change that. You can make your own footprints in the sand, and that's what we did. We worked with amazing chemical engineers and fabricating companies to come up with ideas where we can use some of the equipment for both the processes, not at the same time. And that's why, when it comes to malt season, we can distill all the low wine, and then we can go back to producing grain while we bring the low wine back at leisure and put it through the two pots, because we share the milling, the grist bins, the mashing equipment, and the fermenters. So, and we use a lot of stainless steel, as you saw. I mean, it's, I worked in those fermentation rooms with wooden washbacks, and yeah, as pretty as they are, it's a bit of a nightmare if you haven't got your finger on the pulse. So we kind of took all that out of the equation, and because we were starting from scratch, created something which looks different, but at the end of the day, the legislation is the same as what it is in Scotland, almost to the word. Certain things we state, for example, wooden casks. Scotland states oak casks. In our grain distillations, fermentations, mashing, we can use enzyme in our mashing to help with conversion. The pot distillation malt is exactly the same. So yeah, it was great having you here, Dave, and hopefully, we always say it, but hopefully you do manage to get back at some stage. The shows are coming back online, so
we hope so.
Yeah, let's hope so.
Yeah,
awesome stuff. So just going to read out some of these last comments. Steve Conn Williams said, "Thank you, Andy, and Dave." As there had only, it's Andy and Dave, really. There's been only Andy and Dave's tonight. Your Uncle Vanya, thank you for sacrificing some of your holidays for us, Andy. I will sacrifice my holidays anytime for Pour and Sip. Neil Bolton, great night. Worm Tub wins for me, but close second to the Three Ships. Joe F, indeed, thank you, Andy, for broadcasting whilst you're on holidays. No worries. Steve Conn Williams preempting the question. Penderyn for me tonight was tight with the Worm Tub, but my Welsh history wins out. There's a bit of nepotism there. TACD, Worm Tub wins it, but they've all been really good. Simon, Three Ships for me tonight. Seems I was in the mood for the smoke. Steve Hicks and Penderyn for me tonight. Richard Wingrove, can't decide between the Three Ships and the Worm Tub. Joe F, I'll be buying a bottle of Three Ships, but for me, the winner has to be Worm Tub. That really is something. Neil Bolton, centre parts with the small kids equals remortgage. Good luck, Andy. Yeah, it's pricey. It is pricey, I have to say. Green Tea is green. The Worm Tub, such a powerhouse that it takes the prize tonight, just ahead of 3 Ships. Neil Bolton bought Worm Tub already, but may go back and get a 3 Ships too, as it really grew on me. Daniel Markland, 3 Ships takes it for me. Worm Tub a close seconds. I think you guys are just saying this because these two are still here. And Dave,
I'm a huge 3 Ships fan, and there is the 3 Ships whiskey that you can't get over here. And if anyone's going over to South Africa, please fill your suitcase up for me. It's called Premium Select. It's a 5-year-old. It's just every day. It's South African Whiskey Club's secret. I mean, they all drink it, and they don't tell anyone about it, and it's delicious.
Yeah, that was Dave. I mean, you probably know the story, but that was the first whiskey I actually released, because when I took over the distillery, we only had the one, and I'd come back from Islay. So the 5-year-old Premium Select blend I used originally, it was 5-year Bowmore with 5-year South African grain whiskey. And it was just to remind me of my amazing time in Scotland and Islay, and the blend has stayed, and it's a powerful blend. It punches way above its weight.
Oh, way above.
It's one of those, when you know better kind of things, so the guys don't talk about it too much because then they'll probably push the price up. But they keep selling it and they keep buying it, and yeah, it's great. It's still my go-to dram in the evening. I'll finish the evening off tonight with a 3 Ships 5 and a nice healthy piece of blue cheese. I think the two.
It would be definitely my go-to if it was around here, Andy. Believe me.
Hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Can someone bring Dave Worthington back a bottle?
A suitcase full.
It's the last 2 comments. Greg Buick, it's Worm Tub for me, guys, but a tough one as they've all been very nice rounds. We'll be happy with a bottle of any of them. Jason Copper, Worm Tub gets my vote. Daniel Markland will be hitting the Maltesers hard with the remaining Worm Tub. Inspired. And Neil Bolton saving the last 2 for another day. Happy with my choice. Penderyn nice, but the other 2 ahead for me. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us on this Thursday evening before Easter. We will see you on the next tasting session, which I really should know when it is. I'm just going to take a random guess. It will be on May. Do you know what? I'm not going to, because I could really mess this up, and I actually can't remember when it is. So it's in May, and it's on a Thursday. Yeah. So stay tuned.
Next month we'll do.
Next month, at some point, there will be a tasting session. So thank you so much for joining us all. Cheers from everyone, and we'll see you soon.
Hi. Lovely to see you all.